So there is this unspoken yet fairly well known timeline for marketing, for how long it takes for marketing to work, meaning like it's actually bringing in some really good clients and well funded projects and all that good stuff, right? And that timeline is about 6 months. 6 months. That's if you're starting from zero. Like basically, you've never really done marketing before. Therefore, you do not have a lot of the assets that are needed. You just don't have some of those workflows in place. You got mindset stuff to get over, all of that. That it takes about 6 months to really see consistent, good results from a consistent marketing effort from starting from zero. Now, this is based on my experience working with dozens of clients over the 20 plus years that I've been in marketing, hundreds of conversations that I've had with clients and colleagues. And yeah, this is just that is basically the timeline. It's about 6 months. Now, if you've done marketing in the past, the timeline's usually shorter because you've been around the block before, you kind of know the drill. And so if you got to a place where you're like, you did marketing and therefore it worked because it brought you in clients and projects and stuff. So you quit marketing because you were so busy with all the work that it brought in. I see this happen all the time. When you are ready to start up again, it's going to take, around 3 to 4 months or so. Again, this is all average and, there are, of course, outliers to this, but as I said, this is what I've seen over and over and over and over and over again. So the question then is there anything that can be done to speed up that timeline? And yeah, there is. There are 5 factors to consider, or 5 factors that influence that marketing timeline. So I want to go through those right now and share with you just some things to think about with these 5 factors, because they are all at play or could be at play in your business and in your marketing to really have some dramatic impact on that timeline. Okay, but before I do that, I'll just quickly introduce myself. I'm Lisa Mullis, and I'm a brand messaging specialist who works with coaches and consultants and creative professionals, many of whom are pretty well established in their business, but services have evolved, but the messaging hasn't caught up yet. And so there's this misalignment, and there's a need there's a gap to kind of bring things back up to speed so that they can do better with the marketing and bring in those clients and those projects that they really want and save time and money and all that good stuff. So, okay, these 5 factors. The first one is the frequency of your offer. Or the offers that you're making. Meaning, the more often that you're making offers, the more you're going to see conversion. That's just how it works. There's just a direct correlation between how often you're putting stuff out there in front of people and how soon you're going to start seeing movement around that. And what I see happen a lot is people are just not making enough offers. Not at all. And by offers, that includes, of course, your paid services and programs, but also invitations to events that you might be hosting or resources that you've created. So that could be things like what we would traditionally think of as lead magnets, those kinds of things. So it could be any of that. It could be just putting stuff out there, creating these opportunities for people to step forward and say yes to stuff. And then, that eventually that can lead to the bigger yeses. So frequency of offers. And like I said, by and large, I see many people who are not making offers nearly enough. And I think the reason why that's not happening, well, there's a couple of reasons. One is because people are afraid of just coming off pushy, salesy, all that kind of stuff, annoying people. There's a huge mental block, persistent, very common mental block around that part. And then there's the other piece of it, which I don't even know what to put in front of people, right? So there's that, trying to figure that out too. Okay, so frequency of offers. The more you make, the sooner you're going to see conversions, even the smaller ones that lead to the big ones. Okay, the second factor is the temperature of your audience, meaning do you have people in your world, in your audience, who are hot, warm, or cold? That's typically how we rate the level of familiarity with you and what you're doing and all of that, on that temperature scale, right? Now, I just want to clarify that if you have an email list that you have not emailed in like the last year or so, you don't really have an audience. You have a list of contacts. You have people you could reach out to, but that doesn't mean that they are necessarily aligned and relevant, or that you're going to be relevant to where they're at. There's just like, so consider that pretty much a cold audience. If on the other hand, you've been in regular contact with people, whether that's through direct outreach or broadcast measures like an email newsletter, or you're posting on social, or you're showing up in a community on a regular basis, then you can consider you have probably more of a warm audience. If you have been really consistent with that, then you have a pretty, really warmed up, maybe toward the hot side. And that is going to put you in a position for when you're putting offers in front of people, you're going to see more action, right? Or if you're going to launch something new, wow, you're going to see a lot more happening sooner than if you're having to launch something new, put something new in front of someone to a totally cold audience, right? Like that's fairly logical. Yet I do see, again, lots of people who think that they've got an audience because they've been collecting names or whatnot, but they actually have not had any interaction with these people in quite some time. So if that's the case for you, you've got to factor in that into your timeline, into your marketing timeline. That's part of what takes some time, is to warm up the audience, right? To start engaging with them. So I would recommend, if this is you, if you're recognizing yourself in this position, I would definitely get started. It's like planting a tree. You wish you planted that tree 20 years ago. Just do it now. Start today. Start doing your outreach, getting in front of people, making those connections, even before you're ready to put stuff in front of them, right? Okay, so that's the second factor, which is the temperature of your audience. Now, the third factor is how regularly are you writing and publishing content? Now, let me just clarify, writing can actually come, like the generation of those ideas can actually come verbally. You may be a person that's like, I'm not great at writing, but I could talk to the screen all day long. I could talk out loud, and that's fine. The point is that the writing is a practice and then a way to allow you to get all of that ideas that are in your head out there in the world, out there for you first, in order to understand even what you're thinking and get yourself organized. And this is writing any human can do. This is not writing that necessarily needs to be put in front of other people, but this practice of writing, and I recommend having a daily writing practice. It's an amazing way to understand your perspective, develop that perspective, which is such a huge component of your unique, your distinction and your unique positioning. So the daily writing is what I recommend, but a regular writing practice, and then to also practice publishing. So not all of that writing needs to go out into the world, but some of it does. Some of it needs to get out there. Some of it needs to get out there just for you to get in the habit of putting stuff out in the world. It's almost like an accountability measure, but it's definitely an exercise in visibility, in your understanding, your own mindset around fears of judgment and rejection, and all of that stuff that comes up when we're putting ourselves out there. And so it's a discipline, right? It's a discipline. So when it comes to that marketing timeline, the more regular you are about writing and publishing content, again, it could come in as video or audio, you might have a podcast or whatever, but the more regularity you have with that, that's going to also kind of help shorten that timeline. Okay. Fourth factor is how familiar are people with the type of service that you're doing. So let me give you an example here, my favorite, which is the dentist versus the doula. So everybody knows what a dentist does, Don't have to explain it. The dentist doesn't need to do a lot of education around that. You know, the sales cycle is pretty short for a dentist. It's like, I have tooth pain or tooth prevention. I need to go see a dentist, right? So a dentist marketing themselves is really going to be about some other factors, and maybe there's some unique things about the dental service that they can, highlight, etc. But it's pretty straightforward for the dentist. The doula, on the other hand, a lot of people may have heard of a doula, but they don't really understand what a doula does, or that there's different types of doula, right? So a doula does need to educate people about what they do and why their work matters and how to connect what they do to the sorts of challenges and situations that their ideal people are in. And as a reason, like for them to understand, like, oh yeah, like I need a doula. And so the doula is, needs to do a lot more in terms of just awareness building and connecting those dots for people. So there's less familiarity with the service like that. If you're in a field or doing work that is less known, just inherently less known, just know that there's going to be a longer timeline in front of when you're trying to get people to understand what it is that you do and sell to them. And there's some other nuances to all of that, but for purposes of this video right now, to keep it sort of short, I won't go into all of that, but the level of familiarity with your service is factor number 4. Okay, so factor number 5 is the resonance and strength of your messaging. How aligned is your messaging to the market, and how specific and detailed and emotionally connected is your messaging to your audience? And so you can look at the 4 other factors and, kind of do your thing in each of those areas. But ultimately, if your messaging is off, those other things are not going to work nearly as well, right? So messaging is always like the underlying thread of all communications that are going on. There's a whole internal piece to messaging, and then there's the external expression of all of that, which often is what gets converted into copy and all of that kind of stuff. So the strength of your messaging. And I did another video that talks about strategies for service providers, in which, the bottom line ultimately is around messaging, and I'll link to that in the comments or wherever you're watching this video. But anyway, the messaging is huge, right? It's the foundational piece with all of this stuff. So when you think about these 5 factors and how they impact that timeline, that marketing timeline, imagine that they're like dials. Imagine that they're dials on the dashboard, and you can kind of turn up or down those dials, and that's going to, like, in our case, what we're talking about is shorten that timeline, or just produce better results within that timeline. Okay. So as always, I invite you to share with me questions or comments that you have with this content that I'm sharing with you. I want to know what's your takeaway, what's really landing for you, and that helps me to understand also like what other things that I need to be sharing so I can help people do better with their messaging and their marketing. And I look forward to catching you in the next place, wherever you're showing up. Okay, see you soon.